Now Henderson, AMA Director.
If you don't mind going around the room and introducing yourself and the organization you represent, I do want to say just before, we do have more NOFOs and agendas in the back of the room if you'd like to grab one just for the meeting. But other than that, who would like to start first?
Hi, this is Brian with you with the Arizona July.
I gotta get the.
Oh, I'm sorry. They're grabbing a microphone for you.
Good morning, Candace Ruprecht, City of Tucson.
Yeah. You can probably get this online too.
Andrew Fraser, Maricopa Water District.
Chip Howard, I work in the turf industry.
Jim Holt, Prescott Active Management Area, GUAC.
Dina Burns, City of Chandler.
Tony Solano, Maricopa Stanfield Irrigation District.
Shelley Walker, Maricopa Stanfield Irrigation District.
Kathy Kiefler, Avra Water Co-op.
Linda Coronado, Avra Water Co-op.
Melinda Whittington, Arizona Water Company.
Sergio Beta, DLC Resources, Water Department.
Sarah Gorvin, DLC Resources as well.
Becky Zusi, City of Mesa.
Katie Page, City of Goodyear.
Sandra Hurlbut, Arizona Project Wet.
Thank you. And can everyone on the phones please introduce themselves and the organization that they represent?
Yes, this is Brian Goatee with Arizona Geological Survey.
This is Victoria Cassidy. Apologies, this is Randy Valside, also with the Arizona Geological Survey.
Victoria Castor, City of Glendale.
Kyle Thompson, Winkleman Natural Resource Conservation District.
Leslie Grazer, City of Prescott.
Brianne Kenny, June Golf.
Is there anyone else on the phone?
Water. This is Professor Seiler in Tucson, Arizona with the University of Arizona Cooperative Extension.
Is that everyone on the phone?
Mirage.
Great. So if you could please mute your microphones for everyone on the phone, and I'll get started with the presentation. So welcome to the Groundwater Conservation Grant Workshop. Earlier this year, as part of the Drought Contingency Plan legislation, the department has been allotted $2 million to be distributed as grants to support groundwater conservation within the active management areas. I'll be going over the components of the Notice of Funding Opportunity, or NOFO for short, also referred to as a NOFA, if you've seen that within our solicitation already. And I'll be walking you through all the application submittal process via the online portal. And you're welcome to ask questions throughout the presentation, but please make sure to speak into a microphone so the webinar guests can also hear your question. So let's jump into it. So this is just our the meeting agenda here. First, we'll do the NOFO, then we'll do our application solicitation, submittal, ask questions, and our closing remarks. So for the Notice of Funding Opportunity, I'm going to be going over the components of the NOFO, but not get into all of the details. Hopefully everyone has had the chance to review it, and if you haven't reviewed it, we do have some more copies located at the front table, just outside the door. This grant is administered under the Water Management Assistance Program, but does not pool from the same funds. The WMAP is funded primarily from groundwater withdrawal fees, while the grant fund was appropriated from the state general fund with a specific purpose of reducing groundwater withdrawals within the AMAs. For the purpose of this grant, groundwater conservation includes strategies and technologies that protect Arizona's groundwater resources for current and future generations, which include but are not limited to the reduction in the consumption and withdrawal of groundwater, reduction in the loss and waste of water, improvement in water efficiency, and the increase in the reuse and recycling of wastewater. So for the purpose, the fund has been distributed among the 5 AMAs based on population size, and the Phoenix AMA being the largest is getting the largest portion of the grant with $1,245,000. Tucson's getting $305,000, and the remaining 3, Prescott, Pinal, and Santa Cruz, are getting $150,000. Each AMA also has their own set minimums and maximums. The minimums and maximums were determined by the Groundwater User Advisory Council of each AMA, just for reference. And Phoenix is the only one with the maximum amount. For the eligibility criteria, there is only one mandatory eligibility criterion, and that is that the applicant's program or project must be located within one of the 5 AMAs. Beyond that, there are 2 criteria that must be followed if they are applicable and to the proposed project, and that is if land or water are to be used, applicants must provide appropriate documentation of legal and physical access to the land and appropriate documentation that any water used is legally and physically available. This table is located under the grants details section. It is some examples of projects and programs that is definitely not an exhaustive list. It's more of a list just to kind of get you brainstorming about ideas and different kinds of projects that you can submit to. And also under our grant details section, we also discuss the priorities and payment of funds. And the priorities for this project are granted to those that provide an additional contribution, projects with new innovative qualities, projects that demonstrate higher impact in terms of groundwater conserved, and projects that will demonstrate multiple benefits. For the payment of funds, it's meant to serve as a reminder to those applicants that receive grant funding that they must appoint a representative to manage grant responsibilities and submit project deliverables and documents in accordance to the agreement. Also, just as a heads up, the payments are made upon submission and approval of the deliverable or documentation, and no funds will be reimbursed for expenses incurred prior to the execution of the formal agreement. I know it's jumping the gun just a little bit, but it's just for everyone, just so everyone's on the same page. Next, I'll be covering the application requirements. These items are covered thoroughly within the NOFO. There's a section under each, within the application requirements section. It goes into detail underneath each little bullet point there. Applicants will be asked to submit a cover page, executive summary, which is not to exceed 500 words, a project overview, scope of work, budget breakdown and narrative, additional contribution, if applicable, and project map supplemental information, and the application checklist. And all of those items are located within the NOFO. They're also within the solicitation, and I have them here as reference a little farther down in the presentation. The project proposal should be clear and concise and not exceed 15 pages, just for reference. This doesn't include any maps or forms or any other sort of attachments. So this is our project map. The AMA map, this is just for your own reference to see where the AMA lines are drawn. And then this is our checklist. This is going to be a required item to be submitted within the solicitation, just to kind of make sure that everyone is on the same page and make sure that they have submitted all the appropriate documentation. This cover page is also going to be required within the application process. Just fill it out and submit it there. This is the budget breakdown sheet. This is a fillable PDF sheet, so I would recommend, or not recommend, you have to fill this out for your budget and submit this. But we do have a budget narrative sheet, but this is just a recommended format. You don't need to use this format at all. It's just to kind of make it a little easier and kind of keep some consistency if that is something that you choose to use. We also have the State Historic Preservation Office review form. I don't have the entire form here because it's 5 pages. It's at the end of the NOFO, but I can also go over that more if you have any questions about that. So let me go back up to our timeline. So the full timeline is also displayed in our NOFO, but the most important dates are the closing date, which is going to be February 14th, 2020 by 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, and that is just so I can answer any questions for you up until like the end of the day there, end of working day. And May 29th, 2020 is when the selected projects will be announced. So for the review and selection criteria, our applications are going to be evaluated based on their content. They will also be evaluated based on their clear and concise nature as stated in the application requirements. We have it broken down by percentages here, with the majority of the score being based on the project overview, scope of work, and budget breakdown and narrative. Those are going to be, that's like the meat of this application process. And since the GUACs are going to be playing a role in the applicant selection, I thought I'd take some time to cover what it is that they do. Members are appointed to 6-year terms to represent groundwater users in their respective AMA. Each council provides advice and recommendations to ADWR and the AMA director on groundwater management programs and policies within the AMA. And those eligible proposals are going to be presented to GUAC members, so that's something to also keep in mind. And I've already covered our appendices, but does anyone have any questions about anything that's located in our appendix at this point in time, or anything about the NOFO? Yes.
I had a question about the period of performance, 60 months. Could you explain that?
Yes. So that just means that this project, your project can have a maximum term period with like an agreement with ADWR for a maximum of 5 years, but it can't go beyond that. But it doesn't have to be 5 years.
So some projects may be 6 months, some projects may be a year, but the maximum that we would grant that grant or the funding would be for a maximum of 5 years. Does that answer your question?
I wasn't sure if it was a reporting requirement 5 years after the ADWR contract is complete.
So there likely will be a post-project reporting to the GOAC, to the Groundwater User Advisory Council, and it's specified in the review and selection criteria, I believe. But we would not wait 5 years. We would probably want it a little closer. Thanks for the question.
Are there any other questions regarding the NOFO at this time?
Can you clarify the role of the GUACs? So staff makes recommendations to the GUAC, and then they review for their AMA the project. And then there's maybe a presentation element for the applicants.
Yes. So I will be making the initial review, and then within the department we'll have 3 members of the Department of Water Resources who will also then make a review, and then those review recommendations are going to go to the Groundwater User Advisory Council, who will then make their recommendations to the ADWR director. And in between that, for applicants that are like eligible for the grant, some of them will be asked to make they will be asked to make a presentation to the Groundwater User Advisory Council so they can make their recommendations. Okay.
And just to add to those, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Melissa, but all of the AMAs besides Phoenix, all of the proposals that are eligible would still go in front of the GUACs, only in Phoenix, and it's mainly just to avoid the GUACs staying for a week reviewing applications. There'll probably be some prioritization process going within the department. But in the other AMAs, all of the projects that are eligible would go in front of the GUAC. Again, we'll make presentations, and then the GUAC will make their recommendation to ADWR director, who would make the final decisions on funding.
Okay, so some combination of staff prioritization and GUAC recommendation is the ultimate selection.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Most of the AMAs, it would be relying mainly on the GUAC recommendation.
Oh, okay.
But Melissa will do initial review just to make sure that projects are eligible. So first of all, they're actually located in the active management area, that they are intending to conserve groundwater, and this is really the the focus of this grant is conserving groundwater. So as long as these two items are applicable, then the project is eligible.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks.
Sure.
Are there any more questions? So I will move on to the application, solicitation, and submittal. So I'm going to take you all to the actual grant solicitation. And we can just walk through it together. So this is what our solicitation looks like. It has overview, eligibility, financial, contact, and file tabs. And within these tabs, the first just has our introduction and our grant or program objectives. It also has the closing date again here, as well as here. And if you go to the eligibility criteria, this will also just cover the eligibility criteria that is listed in the NOFO. Here's the breakdown of the award information. Also in the NOFO, my contact information everywhere, so no one loses it. And this is probably the most important for everyone. This has all of our the attachments that are going to be requested within the actual application. Excuse me. So this is the NOFO or NOFA, as I had mentioned, it was also referenced as. And we have our budget narrative, the breakdown sheet, checklist. This is a how-to apply submission application guide for the online portal. So if you have any additional questions that I can't answer, that I haven't answered for you here or shown you, then you can go into that document. You can also call me at any time. It's totally fine. We have the State Historic Preservation Office review form, the cover page, and then the map again for reference. So if you go here and you click apply.
And let me just stop you for a second.
Yes.
So just to mention, you have to apply through this portal in order for your application to be considered.
Oh.
We would have a computer set up within our office if you don't necessarily want to navigate through, but so we can help you, but it has to be submitted through this online portal in order for the application to be received and considered.
So once you're at this page, because you don't have an account at this point, you would just create an account, but because I do have one, I'm just going to show you from just starting at that point. So this is where you're going to enter your email. Oops. And then you're going to click your portal login. You can just ignore the eCivis login unless you already have an eCivis account, but I'm going to assume that you don't. So this is what the front page is going to look like, except for all of this. This isn't going to be there. I was doing several applications. So you'll click on Create New Application. And you'll be taken to this page. There is a second login, and I didn't want anyone to be confused about this, so you'll just go to log in to your grant system. And it's going to be the exact same portal login information as what you just first logged into. Once you're logged in there, this will say action required, and this is where you're going to go and you're going to edit. And this is where you will add all of your information, your title, the company, city, state. You'll just fill out all of this. You can ignore this section. But you'll just fill out the rest of this. The only things that are really required are your name and your name and email. But it'll be helpful probably just to have everything in there. So you'll hit save, and once you've hit save, it'll say complete, and you can go down to the application process, and this is where you're going to, am I going too fast for anybody, by the way? Okay, good. So you'll click application process, and this will say action required as well. You'll hit edit, and this is where you're going to start entering all of your information. So I can definitely walk you through all of this. So in this case, we're just going to put Melissa Demo. Or DEMP, I guess. There we go. You'll put your organization name, and this is where you'll start selecting your files and submitting your cover page and things like that. Your AMA location is a drop-down, so you can select which AMA that you're in, but you'll also need to submit your coordinates. So if you can go to Google Maps. if you don't already know your coordinates, I would assume that that's not a thing that people just know. But if you go into Google Maps and you can click down, or you can go, it's also located up here in the link. But I just kind of go here and I do that, and you can click on it here. And then you would just copy this, take it back to your application, and then you would just submit it there. The project map is going to be a map, like a map of the area in which the project or program is actually going to take place. So this would be your own provided map. This isn't going to be the AMA map that was provided. That's just more for your reference. Your executive summary, this is where you can either type it or you can copy and paste it. It's fine. You do have a word count, though. It cannot go beyond 500 words. There's no exceptions to that. So you'll just need to trim it down if it goes a little over, or just keep it right at 500. For each of these, you'll then select the files to go into these different areas. We have provided you with the budget breakdown sheet back in the solicitation, as well as the narrative if you'd like to use it. The additional contribution breakdown is a, if applicable, document, so you don't need, that's not going to be a required thing to submit. But if you do have any additional contributions that can be in kind or cash, then you would submit that breakdown there. So these three supplemental information, the evidence of physical, legal available of water, evidence of control and tenure of land, and the State Historic Preservation Office review form are all, if applicable, not if applicable. They are if applicable to your project, but they are required here. So if you don't have, if your project is not applicable, like it's not going to be breaking ground or doing any sort of ground disturbing kinds of projects, you would just submit an explanation of why you aren't submitting this evidence. And then this is where you would submit your checklist. And this, you just, if your budget includes it, then you'll put yes. If it doesn't, and this is where you'll hit save. But because I don't have any of these documents saved in here, I'll go back to the presentation, and I can show you what that page is going to look like. So once you hit save, you'll go to be at this page. And if everything is finished, this button will be green, and you can just hit submit, and then your application is submitted. And that's it. So does anyone have any questions regarding the submittal process? Yes. We have a microphone coming for you.
So this is a basic one. In terms of setting up the accounts, for us, we have representatives in multiple AMAs in multiple counties. So would you want to have an account set up for each one of the AMAs, or just do it under the main Arizona Project WET? So, for example, we have people in Pinal, we have people here in Maricopa, and then Pima and Pima. People in Pima, sorry. So that's the question, because we probably would submit something for each AMA.
So we have it set up to where one applicant can submit several applications. So that should be fine in regards to that. If you would like to make separate accounts just to kind of keep track of everything separately, then that would be okay too.
So either way then?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would also add that you would need to apply, so one application per AMA, or it could be two applications if you're an organization, but an organization shouldn't apply under one application for two AMA projects, if that makes sense. So if you are interested, if Project WET is interested in having a project in Tucson and another project in Phoenix and another project in Pinal, even if it's the same project, it's in a different AMA, we would consider those as different applications. So we would ask for Project WET to submit different applications for each AMA.
Okay, great. Yeah, that would probably make it easier just to separate them. Thank you.
And it also better for the applicants, because if for some reason the GOAC and the director decide not to fund one project in Pinal, you still have the opportunity to receive it in Tucson and Phoenix, for example.
Regarding the coordinates, what exactly are you looking for? Just to verify that we are within the AMA, so
Yes.
really anything within our region that's within the AMA is going to satisfy that requirement?
Yes.
Okay.
Super quick question. Will there be some sort of verification that the application was received automatically sent from this system? You know?
Yes, there will be.
So would they get an email or something?
Yeah, they get a confirmation email.
So did you hear what you said? You're going to get a confirmation email.
I know Anna is here as well.
Excellent. And by the way, let's just introduce Anna Henley. Haney, sorry about that. She's from ADOA, and she helped us with navigating through this process. Melissa did that several times, so probably more than several times, so she's pretty much a pro. But if you do have any questions about the process or anything, Anna is here also to answer some of the questions.
Are there any questions on the phone?
Actually, I do have a question. This is Leslie from the City of Prescott.
Okay.
And I sent it in to Teresa as well, so sorry for the double due here. The question is, when you are preparing your application, is there an opportunity to print what you submitted to make sure you didn't miss something? So you have verification of what you sent in.
You can print from the website, but given that the application that Water Resources is using is mostly file uploads, you would be printing that your file upload was uploaded. Does that make sense? So I would suggest that you save the file upload, but you can definitely print from the application, and then once submitted, you'll get an email that says, you know, congratulations, your application was submitted, or something of that sort.
Okay. So the program won't allow you to miss a line item in it. What I'm getting at is I don't want to submit an incomplete application.
Gotcha. Yeah, so it will not, if the section is required, it will not let you submit without filling in that required section.
Okay,
so you can tell the sections are required by having the little red asterisk next to them. And Melissa, please correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that all the file uploads you guys did make required.
Yes, except for the additional contribution.
Okay, thank you.
So there's no opportunity to do joint AMA projects, correct? That's what I heard in response to Sandra's question.
Correct.
Okay. And then second question, what documentation would you want to see for the requirement of legal and physical access to water? I think for a water provider, that's probably easy, but I was thinking for a nonprofit, what would they be submitting?
So a water right, so if an entity has a water right, if they do not have a water right and they are going to partner with an organization, for example, then we need a proof that there is a right to use the water that is intended to be used in the application.
Okay.
Let me also maybe clarify a little more on your first question. So it's not, so let's say a project or a company or an organization would like to do a joint project. If you get the funding for both, let's say Tucson and Phoenix, then you could coordinate the project together. However, in the sense of the application, you would apply to Tucson separately and you would apply to Phoenix separately.
Okay.
And again, it's easier for us to manage, and then we don't have to have both GOACs there at the same room for one application, for example.
Right.
So administratively, it's easier for us. But also for the applicant, it makes sense because then if you don't get one, you would at least have a chance to get the other AMA funding.
Right.
So
would you want reference, though, if we were trying to do a project into AMAs, that was the intent? I mean, should that be clear in the proposals that?
Sure, yeah, that could be helpful for us to know. But
Okay.
again, the recommendation, especially from the GOAC, I would think it would be a good thing for them to know, but they'll make the recommendation on the one application within their AMA.
Okay. And just to the second question, so if it's a non-water provider, they need to partner with a water provider that has the water rights.
Not necessarily. They can,
okay.
if they have their own water rights, if it's an irrigation district, or if it's even a farmer who want to implement some groundwater conservation. So really the idea behind it is that we don't have an application that somebody says, oh, I'm going to use this water for whatever purposes, but as we go through the process and maybe approve the fund, we find out that they don't even have the right to use that water that they rely on for their project. So that's the idea behind that, as well as the access to the land and legal right to use the land. So people don't just want to do a project in an area that they don't necessarily have the legal access to or the rights to use the land. So that's really the idea behind it.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks.
Sure.
Kind of going off what Candace said, just a question, if it was one of these education type things, do we have to provide something saying about water rights and about land if it's an education project?
For education projects, that's not the case, no.
If you're a farmer and you're implementing something.
Like if it's going to be something happening on the ground, then you need to have all that evidence. But if it's an education program, you'll just submit. We're not, this isn't applicable to our project because it's an education project. And
And this is exactly why it is only if applicable. But we do want to make sure, and this is for Leslie's question, we want to make sure that we know that the question was not just skipped over, that somebody who's not providing information did it consciously. And that's why you still have to provide some sort of a justification why water is not going to be, why you're not going to provide those documents, because water is not going to be used and because land is not going to be used in the project.
With regard to submitting the uploadable documents, we need to provide the physical proof of groundwater savings at time of submission, or just some studies that say, yes, we think that something will happen, or yes, we absolutely know that we're going to be able to save?
I think at this point in the process, it would be more of an estimation, but it would be based on data that you already have. So we would hope that it would be a pretty accurate estimation of the kind of water savings that you would have. The point of that was just to avoid any project, not to avoid, but kind of to deter projects that would not be saving any sort of groundwater savings at all. We want to have projects that are going to be have proof of saving groundwater.
And we do have, for education, and maybe that's tug a little bit on Becky's question, obviously education is really hard to measure how much groundwater is going to be conserved, but another way to measure is what is the reach of the project, so how many entities and or individuals the project is intending to reach. So that's another opportunity for those projects that don't necessarily have the tangible ability to measure groundwater savings. And another thing, and I think we have it maybe in project overview, we do want to see in the proposals how the applicant is able to measure those throughout the project. So we want to have, at the end of the project, there has to be a way to measure how much groundwater was conserved and or how many entities and or individuals the project has reached. So there is a way for us to evaluate the effectiveness of the project or program at the end of the process. But we do need to know what those mechanisms would be, what those tools would be when the application is submitted. Does that make sense? Excellent.
Hi, Sina with Chandler. I just to clarify a little bit on that. So if we're doing something along the lines for outreach, let's say we're putting billboards wherever or something like that, would being able to say the reach that the outreach or the advertising mechanism, what they supply to us, would that be adequate as far as what the reach would be from that outreach piece?
Who is they?
I'm just saying, for instance, if we were to do something like put a billboard up and the billboard company says the reach for that billboard is X, would that be enough for this program?
Yes, as long as there is at least some sort of a back behind that, rather than just saying, oh, it's 1,000 people. If there is some sort of a more tangible or reliable source behind that. How do they estimate that it's 1,000 people? I suspect they have a way to calculate it according to something in place. So that, I think, will strengthen your application if you can prove, well, they say it reached 1,000 people because of this and this and this.
As long as we can provide their science behind.
Yes, that would help.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
Are there any more questions?
So question, if we decided to do an educational component and then also partner with say like an HOA or maybe a school or a city that has a tangible source or connection to a tangible source of water, so that we would also need to do the water rights piece for that partnership. Is that correct in the application?
Yes.
All right, I just wanted to confirm that.
So if you're planning on using any water, you'll need to prove that you have the right to use that water, the legal and physical right to do so.
Incentive programs, so it's an acceptable expenditure of funds to give money to customers for purchasing devices.
If you can prove that it's conserved groundwater, then yes, it would be eligible. But again, you need to specify in the application how a certain project or program is going to conserve groundwater.
Okay.
I don't have a question. I had a comment as a member of a Groundwater Users Advisory Council. I just wanted to thank you all for being here and having this interest in this new grant opportunity. I think it's going to be good for all of us. So, again, thank you all very much for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Holt.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions, either on the phone or regarding anything?
And the microphone is mainly for those on the phone because they can't hear us without it.
I wasn't sure if you were going to keep talking. That's why I'm sorry to keep asking questions. But do you have any examples of ineligible programs for this that, like, you say, nope, that's not going to work?
No.
So really, the whole idea behind it is conserve groundwater. Again, this is how the legislation is written. So any project that is not intending to conserve groundwater or doesn't have the ability to do so would be ineligible. I would also mention that we do have this room up until 10, so we are going to be available if you have certain projects that you want to kind of run by us and talk a little bit about it. We can do it afterwards. Both me and Melissa are here, so we can help answer more specific questions. If you want to share it with the group, that's another opportunity because then everyone can learn from one another. So we're more than happy to do so now and also throughout the process. So again, this is Melissa's information. I'm also available if she's not, and we'll be happy to brainstorm with you about how the project is applicable, what can you do to strengthen your application. So yeah, we'll be happy to do that with you guys.
Going back to the water rights piece, since that's not really my area of expertise, if we did partner with another group, is there a specific form number that we'd be looking for to include in the submission? You know, do you guys like ADWR form, which would have a listing of the water rights, or what kind of proof do you need for that, I guess is what I'm asking.
So there are plenty of different water rights, and I think in that specific case, if you don't necessarily know, the entity you're going to partner with should know that they have a water right, but we can work with you to identify what water right you or the entity that you're planning on partnering with has. But again, an entity is most likely know that they have a water right or a legal right to use water.
Yeah, I was thinking about some of the groups that might get their water from like another source, you know, like the homeowners groups or things like that might have to get it through their private water company or maybe public water company. Would they need to get some kind of a water right through their water company or municipality or something?
That's a good question. They again should prove that they get water. Obviously, if it's an HOA, they get water. So just a proof that they are going to be that they are going to be served by the water company or the municipal provider that serves water to them.
Okay, so it could be as simple as that then in some cases.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
So based on this information here, it's talking primarily about conservation, but I think in the presentation initially on the slide, it talked about augmentation. So the water augmentation part of it would be if you could find a service or a surface water supply outside your AMA and bring it in, that kind of a thing?
Again, as long as the whole process is legal, but the idea behind it is if you can find another water supply to augment your supply in order to reduce your groundwater conservation, then the project will be eligible. Could be effluent, for example. It could be any other water supply that would prevent you or limit or reduce your groundwater use. So again, the focus here is reducing groundwater use.
Right. Okay. So then that would indicate that the department is kind of ready to make decisions regarding water right transfers or things like that to augment?
No, it's yeah. Well, it's not connected to that. Again, as long as you have the legal right to the water, then you could apply and use that legal right. If there is no legal right, then it's not applicable. It's not eligible for the project. You have to have the legal right for the water
first. Okay.
First, yes, exactly.
So I work for Maricopa Water District. Irrigation districts are, I think, kind of unique entities within this type of project. Are you looking for the projects that are funded to create kind of transferable knowledge so that, you know, you can go beyond our water district and into cities or into other entities? Is that, you know, I'm looking at the priority schedule. Is that something that's considered? Is that kind of built into the demonstrate multiple benefits category? So you're looking for a project, if we do one within our irrigation district, that could then be transferred, you know, to other areas?
That's ideal. So yes, definitely will be. I don't think it's written in the priorities, but the idea behind it is it's great that it's going to benefit a certain entity, but if you can prove that it could then be duplicated, that definitely will strengthen your application as to the magnitude of impact of a certain project or program.
Are there any more questions? If not, does anyone on the phone have any questions? Very well. So I do want to point out that the solicitation, the NOFO, and all this information is located on the WMAP page. So if you want to go there for any of that, that's the link there. And I also want to say that if you do want to receive if you haven't received any correspondences yet for this grant workshop, please sign in with the sign-in sheet that was at just outside the door there, and we'll add you to the email distribution list of the GUAC of the AMA that you reside in.
Sign in and make a check mark next to in the last column, specify that you want to be added to the GUAC email distribution list. And this is how, one of the ways we communicate information about this grant. And also, obviously, if you are an eligible project, you'll have to present in front of them. So you want to be aware of their activity.
Great. So if there's no more questions or concerns, and this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you so much for coming again. We'll be here walking around if you want to ask us any specific questions.
Thank you.